Hello, hello, and welcome back to another episode of Enjoy the Ride. This is your host, Sean Foyer. Excited as always to bring you another exciting guest. I know I introduced a couple weeks ago my new co-host, and Miss Caitlin will be co-hosting a lot of the episodes with me. She's not going to be on this one today. I'm actually doing an episode solo as the interviewer, and I've got a really, really special guest today. And I typically start these podcast with a story or something that's been going on. But today I want to start it with a story about today's guest, because today's guest is somebody I hold very dear to my heart. He's been one of my original mentors in business and also in life. I talk about a lot that, the good guys should finish last. And this, in my opinion, is not last, that the good guys should finish first. This is one of the good guys that I believe is finishing first. My very first meeting of today's guest was back in 2003, 2004. My father had been searching for some mentorship, some guidance for our construction company. We were looking to grow it. We'd heard about this amazing window company in Southern California that was doing, I believe at the time, about $15 million in replacement windows. And, not to date myself too much, but it was a fax. I remember Certified Contractors Network back then that this guest was a part of would do fax blasts. We got a fax. My dad went out, met this individual, came back and said, Sean, we got to join this organization and you have to meet this gentleman. And so I love going to Southern California. I'm like, this is a great thing. I took my family at the time to Disneyland and scheduled a visit with him. And I will never forget the first meeting, because as I went into his office and sat down at his desk, he literally turned his computer screen around, started showing me everything about his business, including, some pretty sensitive behind the scenes financials. Back then we had a lot of printed material, less digital. He took me into his brochure room with a bag and gave me one of everything, literally one of everything. And I had just never met anybody in my life that was so willing, and not only willing, but excited to help people. And for me, it was my first taste. And today I spend my days helping people. Mr. Charlie Gindele, who I'm going to bring on here in just a moment, is the original mentor for me in that. This man has spent his life building a business that will take care of him and his family, but he's also spent his life helping people. I mean, the ripple effect of not just me, but probably hundreds, if not thousands of individuals that have either heard him speak, been invited to his business, ran into him at a contractor event. It's just unbelievable. Charlie, at the time when I met him, he was part of Dial One Replacement Windows. He became the Renewal by Anderson dealer for Santa Ana in Southern California. Last year, as he retired from his, believe 40-year, maybe longer than that. I'm going to let him expound on that when I get him on. He retired. Me and Miss Caitlin spent New Year's Eve at his house, a beautiful home overlooking the Pacific Ocean in San Clemente. And as I sat and just looked at him and was in his experience, I'm like, man, this is proof. This is living proof that if you just be a good person, you just work hard every day, you just do good things for people, in the end, you're going to end up retiring with your beautiful wife, looking out over the Pacific Ocean. And holy shit, how does it get better? So without further ado, I'm going to welcome my dear friend, my good friend, original mentor, Charlie Gindele. What's up, Charlie?
Hey, Sean. Thanks for having me on today.
Oh, thanks for being on. I know you are what they would say is retired, but as goes with you, you're probably as busy today as you were the day before you retired, right?
Yeah, no, I'm staying busy. I'm doing a little bit of coaching and helping people, but I got a fair share of goofing off mixed in there also. So I'm doing some other things, playing with cars and catching up on some sports, and so life is good. I'm enjoying every day. Oh,
that's awesome. Now sports. Now I think, aren't you a USC fan?
I'm not a USC fan, but
okay.
For a while, USC was the only pro football team we had in town, because we didn't have the Chargers and the Rams. They were located elsewhere. So I used to think of USC as the pro football team here in LA.
Yeah, they've been my school's nemesis for a while, but we finally pulled out a big win at home a couple weeks ago, which was pretty cool.
That was a hell of a game.
Oh my gosh, so fun to watch. So fun to watch. What else is going on in your life that's been fun and exciting? Well, I want to get into the backstory, but right now in retirement, I know You got some cool cars?
Yeah. So, I have a little, I call it my man cave, or it's a worldwide headquarters here where I, spend some time, probably here 20 hours a week, and I've got some cars and, spend time detailing them and doing some other things. And I bought a couple months ago, I bought a pretty cool car. I bought a 1937 Ford Woody station wagon. And that one's at home, though, but that's kind of a cool car to drive around the beach community in San Clemente. You get a lot of thumbs up, and it's just a fun car for that area.
Oh yeah. And I know you share the love of Corvettes that was instilled in me by my father, Ralph. He took me to Corvette Mike's in Southern California for the first time, I think when I was like 6 years old. But I know you took delivery of a brand new Corvette earlier this year, right? Museum delivery.
Yeah, I went back January 5th. I was back in Bowling Green, Kentucky, and I took delivery of my 2022 Rapid Blue C8 Corvette. My daughter Lauren actually went back with me for that. And then earlier this year, back in June, I actually I've been looking for a while, and I purchased a 1963 Corvette split window coupe. It's something I've been looking for.
It's red, right?
What's that?
Is it red? It's red, isn't it?
It's red. It's Riverside red. Yeah. Yeah.
So, and I can't remember what year. Let me go back. Was it 1979, 1980 when Ralph my father took me to Corvette Mike's? He was looking for a 63 split window Corvette, and he wanted a red one. So I love that you found that car and have that car. I can't wait to come see it in person.
It's probably the most collectible Corvette there is, a 63 split window coupe. And because they're so highly sought after, there's a lot of counterfeits or cars that have been kind of built to fit the mode, but they're not really authentic. So I wanted to make sure I got something that was very authentic, and I found one and bought it. And that's, it's kind of an investment. I think it's only going to go up in value, but it's still fun to look at,
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I don't know if I can say this now, but if I could put my name in a bucket there, if you ever decide at some point to try and cash in that investment, I definitely would want to be on the list of discussions on that.
All right. Well, I'll make sure I give you a call on that. I think that'll be my estate who's doing that, though.
Okay. I'll stay in touch with Lauren, and hopefully that's 20 or 30 years from now.
Yeah.
So, and again, I'm a sentimental sucker, and I just want to share this with the audience because, in a few weeks, I'll be talking on an episode probably about my museum delivery white Corvette that I'll be picking up. Right now, it's scheduled for the end of November. But in 2006, my dad always wanted that 63, and he didn't ever get it while he was here on this earth. But in 2006, our business was booming, and I helped him take museum delivery of a 2006 Corvette. And I watched him and my mom on the webcam, which back then it wasn't a very good webcam, but I still have those screenshots today, Charlie. And then I was actually one of the people that you had told about, and I watched you and Lauren. I was taking screenshots of you guys. So I'm excited for myself at the end of the month to go walk in the shoes that my dad walked in, that you walked in. And I don't know, that just feels really good to me.
I mean, if you're a Corvette fan, and, I think probably one of the pinnacles of the Corvette fandom is to get a new Corvette and take delivery of it at the National Corvette Museum in Bowling Green. And, they kind of make you feel like a celebrity. And, it's quite a big deal. And these new C8 Corvettes are highly sought after and hard to come by anyway, so, but it's definitely, put it on your bucket list for those of you who are Corvette fans.
Yeah. And I've shared in past episodes, I didn't even order mine. I mean, I put mine in my mind, and one of my clients ordered it for me, not ordered it for me, but he ordered it for himself and decided he didn't want it, gave me the reservation. And I don't know if I told you this, Charlie, I didn't change one thing on the order. He ordered the exact car, including the museum delivery, that I would have ordered. So it's been pretty cool. I talk about mindset all day long. It's pretty cool to live it and be able to share wins with people of, hey, just hold it in your mind.
Yeah. Well, the old saying, people say, I'll believe it when I see it, but really that's wrong. You'll see it when you believe it.
Yeah. So, and again, we're talking about a successful business person here that lives in beautiful Southern California on the Pacific Ocean. I love the day he retired. Caitlin and I were there, which I'm so grateful, Charlie. I don't know why. I can't tell you enough. One, for just allowing us to be in your space and experience that. But you took me 5 minutes around the corner to your new world headquarters. You're like, this is where I'm going to go now, Sean. But a lot of success. And from the outside, and I've even heard people say it, I just want to be like Charlie. Look at what his business has done in the last 5 to 10 years. But you talk about seeing it. Look, can we go back as far back as you want to go to, how does a guy from Philadelphia, from, northeast part of the United States, end up in sunny California, living the American dream? And what were some of the challenges as we dive into this along the way? Because I know it wasn't easy.
Well, yeah, I grew up in a blue collar neighborhood in the northeast section of Philadelphia. And my dad was a fire captain and grew up in a family of firemen and policemen, and, blue collar type neighborhood, and blue collar type values of hard work. And way back when, with the shift work that policemen and firemen worked, most all of them had second jobs. Number one, because they had some time off, but also because they weren't really being paid much like they are now. They're policemen and firemen are being paid much better. But so back then there was the need to earn money, and my dad was a very resourceful guy and always had a second or a third job. And one of the jobs he had was working for a contractor who was doing roofing and siding and insulation and things like that. So starting about the time I was 10 years old, my dad would take me out with him, and a couple of days a week during the summer when he was working, and sometimes on the weekends, a Saturday when he, during spring or fall when school was in session. So, I started off as a go for this, go for that, and climbing ladders and picking that up. And but I loved doing things. I loved working with my hands, and I got a great deal of satisfaction from stepping back from what I had done, and saw what I had created, or what I had built. And then if the homeowner paid you a compliment, that just was icing on the cake, So I did that.
How old were you when you started doing that? How old were you when you started?
I was 10 years old.
Oh, wow.
And I tell you, my dad paid me 50 cents an hour out of the money that the contractor paid him. So I think it was the second summer when I was working there with my dad, I was up on a ladder installing some aluminum siding. And the guy that my dad worked for, his name was Gene Taylor. He stopped at the job, and my dad and him were down on a sidewalk talking, and I could overhear their conversation. And Gene says to my father, "Is that your kid up there on the ladder?" And my father said, "Yeah." And Gene says, "He looks like a hard worker." And my father says, "Yeah, he's a real hard worker." And Gene says, "What are you paying him?" And my father said, "I'm paying him 50 cents an hour." And Gene said, "Hell, I'll pay him 50 cents an hour." So in a matter of minutes, I doubled my income from 50 cents an hour to $1 an hour. But that made an impression on me back then, that hard work gets noticed. And, and if you want to, be successful in life, money's not the ultimate means of success, but it's what we can do with the money, the lifestyle we can live, the people's lives that we can improve. That's really what the money's all about. And so, it made an impression upon me to work hard, and even later when I was in high school, in college, I always had spending money in my pocket. My buddies did, and I did, but I worked every summer and had side jobs and started doing my own home improvements, contracting work. And when I was in college, and then, the money was good, and almost didn't go back for my last semester, but my father convinced me I should go back and get my degree, and I did. And then I worked for then I started my own home improvement business full time for 3 years. And after college, and making good money, enjoyed what I was doing. And then I got married, and when my first daughter, Lisa, was born, I all of a sudden started to get very security conscious. And I started to feel like, I'd wasted my college education. All my buddies were wearing coats and ties, and they were junior executives in the corporate world. And here I am out selling siding and roofing jobs and climbing on ladders and roofs, and I felt like, geez, I'm like, if I get hurt or something happens, all of a sudden there's no money coming in, and now I got a wife and a house and a daughter. And so that led me to start looking around for, I guess what I would call more secure employment. And long story short, I went up to taking a job with Alcoa Building Products, and I moved from Philadelphia out to central Pennsylvania as a district sales manager. And I was there for a couple of years. And then because of the installation background that I had, I got a position. They offered me a position in the corporate headquarters in Pittsburgh as a staff engineer. And I was product application specialist. And that led to some things. And I got involved in marketing and doing some marketing of products. And back then we had this aluminum roofing product that was really not selling very well. And a competitor went out of business. And so all of a sudden we had these customers that weren't interested in buying our product calling us now because the other product was no longer available. And I got involved in that, and they were in Texas and Florida and Washington State, and I started traveling out meeting with them and trying to help them, and realized we had a good product, but we didn't have a system or a process for installing it. So I got involved in that, and I built an installation process for it and started making some training films and traveling around doing seminars and sessions, and that got me traveling even more. And I wound up going to Southern California one day on a training session, and just fell in love with. I'd never been to Southern California before. I fell in love with the weather and the lifestyle. And everywhere I looked, I saw wood shake roofs, and that was a prime market. So it took me a couple of years, but I finally decided to leave the corporate world and move to Southern California in April of 1984. And started an Alcoa aluminum roofing contracting business. And eventually that morphed into doing windows and doors, and eventually got out of the roofing business and focused on windows and doors. And, that's kind of the short version of how I got from Philadelphia to Southern California.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I love too, we look at, the characteristics and the traits that get, impressed upon us as children, or what we take into adulthood. And some of them are good and some of them aren't good. But for you, that hard work, right? That ethic of, I'm going to work for 50 cents an hour. I worked harder. I got it doubled. That created a paradigm in you that I know, because I've watched you and seen you and been in contact with you pretty much throughout since 2003. You are a hard worker and you always add value. And I love to hearing a little bit more about your teaching too, because you've always been somewhat of a teacher as well, right? Even when you were working for Alcoa.
Yeah. So, the thing with Alcoa was, one of the lessons I learned is, if you're going to teach something, you really have to own it. You have to own the material. You have to own the knowledge. And so teaching is a great way to learn something, right? Because
yes.
You can't teach it if you don't know it. And so, I was, 26, 27 years old, and I started traveling around and putting seminars on and training sessions in. And I'd fly into Oklahoma City and meet our district manager at the airport, and he'd pick me up and we'd go to the Holiday Inn, and I sent him a list of lumber we needed, and I'd take off my coat and tie and put on my jeans and t-shirt, and I'd build a roofing display there. And then that night or the next morning, we'd have 20 or 30 contractors come in, and I'd put on a 90-minute seminar on how to install our roofing, and part of it was sales and marketing, because we were trying to sell the product, and the other part of it was the practical part of being able to install it and teach and train. And, and when you taught and trained, then that allowed more people to know how to sell your product. So it all went hand in hand. And when I got a lot of satisfaction doing that at an early age. And it's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of gratifying to think you could teach somebody, you could train somebody, you could help somebody, And in this business, you can help people by teaching and training. You can help them, earn money and provide for their families. And, the old story, if you give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. But if you teach a man how to fish, he'll be able to eat every day, And so teaching them skills that help them, learn how to earn a living and improve their life has always, it registered with me, and I think it made an impression on me. And, and it gave me a lot of gratification to think that I could do that. And then as my career evolved, I got involved with different organizations and just found myself in situations where I could teach or train or share, and sometimes the things I share are not, they're lessons learned the hard way,
What not to do, right? What not to do.
Yeah. I mean, I only had hit my thumb with a hammer once or twice to know that I don't want to do that. But there's a lot of other times in life when you can hit yourself, in other ways that, are lessons you never want to repeat. But if you can share that with someone and help them compress their learning curve or avoid mistakes that you've made, I mean, that's helpful too, So,
and if somebody's listening today, because I really do think we live in an interesting time, whether it's a young adult coming out of college or thinking about college, or somebody who's approaching middle age and in a job that they're not getting satisfaction. I think we live in a time where there's more opportunity than ever, but we also live in a time where there's a lot of fear and anxiety. And, hearing your story, I mean, you went from what seemed like not secure, your own business, to a corporate job that was secure, to then chasing your passion. I guess I'm just thinking, besides hard work, besides teaching, what else would you share with somebody listening today who's maybe not feeling their purpose and looking at somebody like you saying, oh my gosh, look at this successful guy. I know, and we can talk a little bit about some of your struggles, because I know firsthand you've shared them with me before. It's not all roses, the path to get to where you want to go.
Well, let me tell you. So, I told you I felt this since, at the time I was 23, 24 years old, but I'm a new husband, a new father, got a house, got my own little business, but I felt, sense of insecurity. And I looked at my dad. My dad worked for the city of Philadelphia. He had a pension, he had benefits, and then later he went to work for the Navy as a fire marshal and worked for the government, had security and pension. So I just thought, well, geez, I got to get a real job working for a real company. So I got a job with Alcoa Building Products. And about 5 years into that job, now we're into the early 1980s. And if people remember back then, interest rates were 18, 20%. You get a mortgage for 19% interest.
Yeah.
Right now they're at 6 or 7%. And people are freaking out.
That's still a pretty good rate for back then. That would have been amazing
mortgage,
in the 80s.
So we were going through some tough times, and Alcoa, the company I worked for, was a big corporation. They went through this overhead valuation and analysis program. And they were basically looking ways to cut waste and become more efficient, become more profitable. And the byproduct of all that was, and how it impacted me was, the division I worked for was in Pittsburgh, and we had a manufacturing plant out in Western Ohio. And to cut costs, they decided to merge my office in Pittsburgh with the manufacturing plant in Ohio. And we had about 60 people in our office in Pittsburgh, and 48 of those people either got early retirement or got laid off, and 12 of us got moved to Sydney, Ohio, and I was one of the 12. And in retrospect, it kind of tore my life apart, because I was very happy in Pittsburgh, and I realized at the time I was 29 years old and I was a bargain. And guys that were, in their mid to late 50s, early 60s, that weren't ready to retire, all of a sudden were told, you're no longer needed, and we're going to give you an early retirement plan or whatever. And that was emotionally devastating to them, and impacted them financially also. And then a couple of them were told, well, we need you in Sydney, Ohio, so you either got to move to Sydney, Ohio, or you don't get anything. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is the security that I thought I had with the big company quickly evaporated, and it wasn't there. So, and then I went to Ohio for a year, and then I didn't want to spend the rest of my life there, and I had this lure of moving to Southern California hanging over me, and I ultimately, so I went. And I left I was 30 years old. I had a very secure job. I got a promotion, but I realized that all the security I thought I had, I really didn't have. And I was willing to give all that up to move to Southern California, 2,200 miles away and start a business, in an area where I didn't really know anybody or anything, and just believing in myself, and there was a metamorphosis that occurred there where I had confidence in myself now, where I didn't have confidence before. I now had confidence that I was, and later I heard this quote, and it really summed up how I felt. And it was from Robert Schuller, and it was, "If it's going to be, it's up to me." And that became one of my mantras in life, that, and then, another one by Henry Ford: "If you think you can, you can. If you think you can't, you can't. Either way, you're right." So those two sayings wrapped together became my mantra. And I just said, look, I can't live the next year. I can't live the next 10 years, but I can live today, and I can, do the best I can today, and have confidence that I'll get to tomorrow, and tomorrow I'll figure out tomorrow, and the old story, one day at a time, is very true. That's you can't live life a week or a month or a year at a time. You got to live it a day at a time, and sometimes, a minute at a time. And if you get that inner confidence to believe in yourself, and in my case too, believe in God, that there's a higher power that is, that will take care of you if you're doing the right things, then that's really how I overcame that. Fearing I didn't have security, thinking I did have security, and ultimately arriving at the conclusion that any security was going to be based upon my own thought processes and believing in myself.
Oh, I love the way you just said that and tied that back together, because, my work now, I spent the last 4 years a deep dive on mindset, and everybody is always looking for security on the outside, right? From a job, from maybe a parent, from somebody else making us feel like it's going to be okay. But true freedom, true independence, and true power comes from within. And your shift was that you are your security. And I know, and I don't want to get like too specific on numbers, but how much revenue did you do your first year in business in 84?
1984. Yeah, we did 37 jobs, and that was not the full year. We started April 1st. So we did 37 roofs that year, and it was like $400,000 in revenue.
So 400,000. And last year, your last full year in the business, when you retired, 40 years later?
38 years later, yeah.
38. What did you do in gross revenue?
About 48 million.
So 400,000 to 48 million in 38 years. That's a timeline, right? You see those memes. What does success look like? Was it a straight line from 400,000 to 48?
No. I mean, it started off slowly, and then we kind of plateaued, and actually about 10 years into the business, I was kind of stagnant, and weren't really growing. We were probably at about $4 million, but we'd been in that range for a while. And I had a very life-changing event that occurred to me in 1995. And that was, I went to a seminar, a couple-day seminar, and it was talking about, running your business by the numbers and business planning. And I tell you, it was a life-changing event, life-changing for my own personal life, my family's life, also for my business. And, I realized that I'm sitting there listening to these guys speak about, gross profit and cost of leads issued and operating profit and cost of goods sold and things that I had heard the terms, but I never really focused on them. I didn't run my business by those numbers. And I felt very humiliated, very inadequate, and quite embarrassed. I mean, to myself, no one else knew what was going on inside me. And I actually had this thought. I was in a room with about 60 people, and I actually had this thought that if I dropped my pen on the floor and I reached over to pick it up while I'm down there, I could take my pocket knife and put a slit in the carpet and maybe crawl out of the room under the carpet, and no one would know that I left the room. I just felt so inferior and inadequate, but out of that came a conviction that I realized that for the first 10 years or so I was in business, I had worked really hard to become a very good contractor, and I gave value to my customers. I gave value to my employees. Probably the persons I was short circuiting the most were myself and my family by not bringing value to us. And and I realized I had to become a business person and instead of a contractor. I had to become a business person that owned a contracting business instead of just becoming a contractor.
Yeah.
And so I really started to run my business by the numbers, and that's a whole nother story. But that was really a turning point in my personal life and my business life.
Well, and I think in this, I want to touch on this just for listeners to reiterate this. Two things that you just touched on there. One is know your numbers. And I don't care if you're a small business owner or if you're an executive or a manager, even if you're an employee in your personal life, you have to understand your numbers, right? Whether it's a personal family budget or a professional business budget. And so many people don't, and they're afraid to raise their hand and ask for help. And there's so much help out there today. And Charlie's worked with lots of contractors. I was one of them. In 2004, when I sat in my first business planning boot camp at the Certified Contractors Network, Charlie had volunteered his time and was teaching it. And I had the same thought as he was describing his thought. As I looked around the room, I wanted to cut a slit in the carpet and duck out. I mean, I had gone to business school. I had a degree, and a lot of the things they were asking us that we should know about our business, we didn't know. And there's a lot of power in being vulnerable and raising your hand and saying, I actually don't know what I'm doing here. Could I get some help? And there's people like Charlie and now people like me that are willing to help. So that's, two key things there. One is understand your finances, whether it's professionally, personally, or both. And then the other is be willing to be vulnerable and ask for help. And Charlie is a teacher. He's a lifelong student. He's still learning. He's still studying. That's where I learned a lot of it from, as I've watched him and I've wanted to become the ultimate student. How do I study success and become better at it?
Yeah, so that was really a change. And then later, as I started to implement these new ideas and look at how I ran my business differently and getting my team involved and stop doing certain things and start doing other things. When I got involved with Certified Contractors Network, Richard Kaler, who was the founder and the owner at the time, he said, Charlie, your business is a little bit different than some of the other businesses. You talk about different things and goals and plans and strategies and tactics and objectives. And where'd you get all that from? And I explained to him my experience with going through the business planning and how for the last 5 or 6 years I'd been running my business differently. And that ultimately led to Certified Contractors started teaching that business planning curriculum there and, taught it. Well, I'm actually teaching it again next month, but taught it for many years to, hundreds of different contractors and I taught it with passion because, if you found something that really changed your life, wouldn't you want to share it with everyone else? That's the way I felt.
Not everybody thinks that way, but you do. And I love that about you. Yeah. You want to share it with the world, and you've helped. You think about how many people have been impacted, and then you've shared that material outside of CCN with a lot of people, including myself, and said, hey, Sean, here's some of the tools that you can use to help people. And the ripple effect of that, Charlie, talking, money's one thing, but improved lives of guys that were looking, and guys and gals that were looking at their finances saying, I don't know how I'm going to make payroll. And they didn't know how to fix it. And now they have tools because you were brave and sat in a room that you were uncomfortable in and learned some information and then implemented it and then shared it.
Yeah, no, and it's, and I have a passion for it. And I love to hear from people and see people that have, benefited from it and how it's changed their lives, and now they're changing other people's lives, and, one other thing, Sean, is there's a lot of people in my life that have helped me in various ways that I could never repay, with my time, with my money, with anything. But the thought occurred to me that, and they weren't looking to get repaid either, by the way,
Yeah.
they were trying to help me. And I look at it like, if I can pay it forward and help other people, then, that's my way of paying back the people that helped me, by paying it forward. And if you really stop and think about that, life in general, I mean, if everybody has something to offer, and if we can pay forward the things that we've learned to help other people, I think we'd be living in a different world than we are today. There's so many people just what's in it for me, and very selfish or self-seeking, and not that you got to have some ego in life, but it's not all about yourself. It's about helping other people. And my father used to say, you never see the Brinks truck following the hearse, so you can't take it with you. And while we all like to have a nice life and nice things and toys and trips and vacations and all that, I mean, but at the end of the day, it's not what we have, it's what we have done that really makes a difference, and I think that's the testimony to a life well lived, is, how many people have you helped, and, is the planet a better place because you were here, or is it a worse place because you were here? And, and I don't think we should ever sell ourselves short of how much impact we have. I mean, I don't think anybody on this call today is probably going to come up with a cure for cancer, but there's a lot of other illnesses and mental illnesses and business illnesses and self-doubts and things like that we could all help other people cure or find a solution to, and that's not such a bad thing either.
No, it's not. I mean, one of the things in my work that I do, and I learned from Bob Proctor, we've got a whole module, Charlie, that's called the impression of increase. I spend a whole week 3 times a year with business owners all of the United States talking about the impression of increase. And the impression of increase is, how do I add value to this world? From a barista at a coffee shop to a complete stranger, to my employees, to my customers. And, that's exactly what you just described. The impression of increase is, I put it out there, and somebody put it out there for me, and I'm going to keep paying it forward and keep paying it forward. And I definitely will say this world's a much better place having had you in it. Now, one thing I kind of want to touch on maybe for a little bit, because entrepreneurs, even just head of households that are employees, we get into dark places when we don't have the financial means to take care of our family. And I know as a successful business person, you've had a couple stumbling blocks along the way. Would you be willing to share a little bit vulnerably? I've talked about mine in the past. I mean, I got stuck in a roundabout thinking about my life insurance policy at one point, because it's like, holy shit, I'm in a mess. Like, I'm a good business person, but this is bigger than me right now. And some of those moments is where I found my biggest strength. But what was your biggest challenge?
Well, in 2004, everything was falling into place. I turned 50 years old. My business, we had the best year ever. Back then, it was about $15 million. I just built and purchased this new building, 35,000 square foot Taj Mahal office building in Santa Ana. And
I went through that building. That was a beautiful building. Beautiful.
Yeah. It was the Taj Mahal for our business and our industry. And, it was just, and it was wonderful. And life was really going well. And that's also the year that I signed to become the Renewal by Anderson affiliate here in Orange County. And in retrospect, I didn't realize, at the time I didn't realize it was kind of like blowing up my company and starting over. It was really a major change. And so beginning of 2005, we started with Renewal by Anderson, and we were selling a much more expensive product. And before, we kind of had a good, better, best approach to the products we sold. Now we just had a best product, and that was it. And it was higher priced. And some of my sales guys couldn't handle selling a more expensive product. And also, it took a little bit different philosophy in lead generation. So we struggled a little bit in the first couple of years. And then just about that time is when, the economy started tanking. For about 10 years in Southern California, especially Orange County, real estate prices were escalating like crazy. And, it got to the point where there were all these subprime lenders, and if you could fog a mirror, you could get a mortgage, and
Right.
and if you owned a home, then if you could fog a mirror a second time, they would give you a home equity line of credit, and they would give you more money than your house was worth, with the belief that the value was just going to catch up to it in 6 months or a year, and generally it was. And then in beginning of 2007 and 2008, housing values started declining. The mortgage business was built on a house of cards, and there were these Wall Street investors investing in all these junk mortgages, and we had two of the largest subprime mortgage lenders in the country here in Orange County. And, we actually did a job in about April of 2008, and the customer owed us $40,000. And as we were finishing the job, they called up and said, "Hey, we have a problem." I said, "What's that?" They said, "We can't pay you." I said, "What do you mean you can't pay us?" And they said, "Well, we had a home equity line of credit, and we were going to write you a check, but about a week ago, we got a letter from our lender saying that they had frozen our line of credit. And all of a sudden, we don't have access to the money we thought we had to pay you." And then in the next few weeks, that happened a couple more times. I actually had some employees come into work. They were upset that their home equity line of credit had been frozen by their lender. And it was kind of a tough time. And then if you remember, in the summer and late summer and early fall of that year, the Ford and General Motors and Chrysler were going to Washington looking for bailouts. The airlines were looking for bailouts. We were going through an election process and national election for president. And, they had Lehman Brothers failed on Wall Street, and all of a sudden the sky was falling, and foreclosure started to ramp up. We found locally here, shopping centers, stores closed down, car dealers shut down. And all of a sudden people, and if you had a job, you didn't know how much longer you were going to have your job. A lot of people didn't have a job.
You're coming off a couple really good years. You've got all this overhead from this new building, right? And then all of a sudden the brakes go on.
Right. So we were out of cash, and I got into debt. And I got in about $400,000 worth of debt in the fall of 2008. And beginning of 2009, I kept getting into debt. And finally, by about March of 2009, I was about $900,000 in debt. And business had slowed down. People weren't, all the advertising dollars in the world weren't making the phone ring, because people were scared to death of losing their home, or had lost their home, or losing their job, or fear of losing their job. And so the market contracted quite a bit. And I was looking for, a lot of sleepless nights, a lot of crazy thoughts going through your mind.
Well, do you want, because I actually was in a similar situation, obviously, different state, but we had the same problems going on. We had made a shift to renewal. I had just built my dream home, and I broke ground in 2007. It was ready in 2008. And like you say, and I don't know about you, but for us, not only the home equity lines, all my lines of credit, my business got frozen. Like literally overnight, I came in, all my Amex cards that we had used to roll suppliers, and everything is gone. And now you've got the weight of the world, right? Because you're not just responsible for your family. You're responsible for how many families, employees, and the weight of that. And I just share this because I think sometimes we take for granted the entrepreneurial spirit. And I know I've, heard younger people, complaining about entrepreneurs that make so much money. It's like, it takes men and women that are willing to carry the weight of the tough times that allow us to have the opportunities that show up later on in life. And for you, that was dark, right? Literally you have the weight of the world, $1 million in debt. How are you going to pay things? It's all on your shoulders at the end of the day.
Yeah. And, along the way, we made a lot of moves to downsize the company. The key thing, big word there, was right size. Everybody's trying to right size their business.
Yeah, but what's the right size when it's full?
Yeah, well, you might have right sized it for today, but you didn't right size it for tomorrow, because the market was contracting and no one knew really where the bottom was, and they were unprecedented times. I mean, there's a reason why, in retrospect, now they call it the Great Recession. There's lots of recessions, but this one was matched and unparalleled in our history. And moved smaller facilities, cut overhead, and then one of the most difficult things from an entrepreneur or business owner standpoint is, getting the right people is such a critical thing for your business. I mean, you got to get the right people, and you work so hard to get the right people and teach them and train them and motivate them, inspire them. And then now all of a sudden you have to start letting go of some of those people who, through no fault of their own, I mean, I've terminated plenty of people in my career
that deserved it
for right reasons, but all of a sudden when you got to let go of people that are star employees, are great people, they're great employees, they're great workers, they're great human beings. And all of a sudden, you kind of almost start to feel like you're God, like you're playing with people's lives. And that's not a good place to be. And yet, you can't bury your head in the sand and just ignore those things. You got to confront them and deal with them. And, I know there was a lot of mornings when I would leave my house and, it'd be dark outside at 5:30 in the morning, and I'm getting in my car and I'd say to myself, Lord, there's nothing can happen to me today that the two of us can't figure out, because I knew I couldn't figure it out, but I believe, anyway. But I actually got to the point where I went to see an attorney, bankruptcy attorney, looking for some answers. And his advice was just pull the plug and shut it down, cut your losses, file Chapter 7 and liquidate the company, and, let your creditors, kind of let them deal with it. And, so now I'm looking at laying off all the rest of my employees. I had, like, at the time, probably 25 or 30 employees. That was down from 100 a couple years before. And, and I had good personal relationships with a lot of my creditors, and just walk away from them and let them hold the bag. And so that just made the situation worse, thinking about doing that. And then finally, I talked to another friend of mine. He said, well, I know a guy, you ought to talk to him. So I went and talked to this guy, and his name was Michael Good. Maybe the last name was prophetic, because he had some good news for me. He said, not Chapter 7. He said, you want to save the business. You don't want to throw it away. This is your life's work. And he said, there's another chapter called Chapter 11. And I like that chapter much better of the book.
Yeah.
And chapter 11 is basically a reorganization of the business. And what you do there is, you file a plan with the court. And then if the court accepts it, all your creditors kind of get put on ice while you reorganize the business. And then, you've got to come up with a repayment plan to repay them the debts, but over a period of time. And so we worked through that. And I would say this, because I knew the numbers of my business very well, that when you're going through tough times and the business of your numbers, it's even like a curse, because now you can't deny the reality.
You don't want to know the numbers when they look like that. It's like, no, I wish I could bury that for a minute. I know. I've lived.
You wish you could bury your head in the sand, but you can't. So anyway, but I knew the numbers of my business, and I had reworked them for the umpteenth time, and I had a plan, because I realized that if I had all the marketing dollars in the world, I couldn't have confidence I could generate enough leads to sustain the business. But when I really analyzed the numbers, I was getting a certain amount of business every month from past customers coming back and buying second or third jobs, from past customers referring us. And that cost me little or nothing. And then the other thing was that we had some leads from our website and some internet leads that it was pretty predictable and reliable too. So I realized that I could count on about $400,000 of business a month from those, what I call low acquisition cost lead sources. And so I rebuilt the business on paper to and rate sized it so that we could be profitable at about $375,000 a month and revenue. And I was betting that I could generate enough business to sustain that. And I met with the attorney, and he looked at it. He tried to pick it apart, and he couldn't. He was solid. And then another option I had was with my creditors. I could pay them back, a percentage of what I owed them over a period of time. But I was kind of adamant about that. If I was going to do this, I was going to pay them back 100%. 100%. That no one was going to get a haircut or get less than what they were owed. So filed a plan with the court. The court accepted it. The creditors accepted it, and began a new way of running the business. And actually, after we made all those moves, March of 2009 was the most profitable month we had like in 2 years. And from that point on, we just made money every month, and we were consistently generating $400,000 to $425,000 a month in revenue. We were profits, weren't big numbers, but they were enough to keep the business going and start to pay back creditors. And you've probably heard the old axiom, take care of your customers and they'll take care of you. Well, in my case, that was the truth, because the customers that we had done work for, we were able to lean on them, and they kept coming back and buying more business and referring us. And that really allowed us to sustain ourselves over the summer and fall of 2009. In 2010, things got a little better. In 2011, things got better. And, from there, we pulled ourselves out. By, I think, the end of 2011, we had paid off all of our debts, and our case was dismissed from Chapter 11. And it wasn't until that point in time when Michael Good called me to tell me that the court had, dismissed our case and we were out of Chapter 11. He said, Charlie, I didn't tell you back then. He said, but only about 25% of the companies that go into Chapter 11 make it out successfully. The rest of them all wind up going to Chapter 7. Mm-hmm. And but he said, I don't want to tell you that up front because I don't want to burst your bubble. Well, I'm glad he didn't tell me that, but that was one of the few times I was glad to be in the minority in my life, so.
Yeah, when you just had the mindset and the determination that you weren't going to fail. I mean, I can hear that in you telling that story, right? That failure wasn't an option.
Failure's not an option. You can't give up. You can't quit. I mean, there were a lot of dark hours and dark days, and there were times when, believe me, I felt like giving up. That would have been the easier thing to do. And I had some crazy thoughts, at night driving home from work, and that I don't even want to bring up, just about, how I could. But that would have been the selfish thing to do, or that would have been the easy way out for me, but not the easy way out for all the other people that were counting on me and depending on me. So, you just suck it up and you do the right thing. And, what you can't figure out, you and the Lord can figure out. And, you just put one foot ahead of the other and get up the next day and do the best you can, and yes. Keep working at it, and looking back and in retrospect, it's kind of I can see it all unfolding, but when you're living it day to day and you don't know what's around the next corner, it's not always clear cut, but you got to believe in yourself. You got to believe in the nobleness of what you're doing. You got to believe in doing the right things. And,
I like that you believe in God too, right? I mean, there is a higher power that always has our back,
Well, in my case, that's, it couldn't be more true. And in many times in my life, but especially during that time, you live to fight another day, and hopefully, you make a positive impact along the way.
Yeah. Steve Jobs has a quote, and I'm probably going to butcher it a little bit, but it's about connecting the dots, and you cannot connect the dots moving forward. You always can back. Like, you look back now and you say, oh, that was perfect. But when you're looking forward, you have to trust in something, yourself, destiny, God, whatever it is, you have to have belief. And I love, listeners, if you're listening, hear Charlie say, believe in yourself. Believe in yourself. I mean, I spend a lot of time on mindset helping people that don't believe and don't have the confidence raise that. But that's the number one thing. And then the other one is, and I'm talking more and more about this because it keeps coming up and God has blessed me so much, but Connect to your higher source, whatever you want to call that higher source. I call him God. Get on your hands and knees and pray. You need some help. You can trust yourself. You can trust your God. And then the other thing too is, I've talked a lot. I've had a few people close to me in my life that have taken their own life because they got in situations and they didn't ask for help. And Charlie's shared pretty vulnerably his struggle, his battle. If you're listening to this right now and you're going through a struggle and you're having a challenge, I just want to jump through the microphone and say there is help available. Just raise your hand and please ask for it. There's always a way out. There's always a way out, whether it's financially bankruptcy, whether it's a health challenge you're dealing with. There's an option that you're not seeing right now. And on Enjoy the Ride, the movement, we're sharing positivity. Charlie Gindele is living proof, living example that ups and downs are going to come at you. But if you persist, if you trust yourself, if you trust a higher power, you're going to end up living in Southern California with a bunch of Corvettes, a beautiful wife, a beautiful home, and a swimming pool with a really cool bell that you get to ring every morning. Woohoo! Let's go. Right?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's everything you said there is right on, Sean. I mean, it's, there's a lot of times you want to give up, a lot of times things aren't fair or, things just seem like the deck's stacked against you or whatever. But, in retrospect, you can connect the dots, but when you're living it, it can be stressful. It can be unnerving. It can make you want to give up. It can make you look for the next exit. But you got to hang in there. And again, I go back to those two sayings that I've kind of built my life around, and that's, if it's going to be, it's up to me. And if you think you can, you can. If you think you can't, you can. Either way, you're right. I mean, this thing that's on our shoulders that stops our two ears from touching talks us into stuff or talks us out of stuff all day long, and the other thing too, I'll say is that I think it's important to hang around with people that are positive and people that are successful. And, I've often thought if you're the smartest person, you need to get some new friends, because, I heard this a long time ago and it made sense. Emulate other successful people, follow what they do, look at what they do. Not that their life is yours or your life is theirs, but there's clues there. There's things they do.
Success leaves clues. Success leaves clues. Look for the clues.
There's thought processes and there's some people in my life that don't even know that, but they've been that for me, and they've been successful and they've inspired me to be successful. My form of success is different than theirs, but the fact is, if they could do it, why can't I do it? And then again, it goes back to, if you think you can, you can. If you think you can't, you can't.
Well, and just so and I've told you this privately, I've shared it publicly, but you're one of those people for me. Like from the first day I met you in your office, you sharing everything, the business planning that you led me through with emotion and passion. It wasn't about the numbers. It was about creating a life to be proud of, creating a life that you could stand behind. And I've watched you passionately live that and share it with so many people. So to wrap up this episode, I hope you guys, listeners, I hope you got some nuggets and some truth from this man. Charlie, what's your favorite book you've ever read?
Oh, boy. I mean, there's, as far as business books, I mean, The E-Myth by Michael Gerber, Good to Great by Jim Collins, Built to Last by Jim Collins, some of the Napoleon Hill stuff,
Think and Grow Rich.
Really good stuff. But then, I'll tell you this quick story. I did a job in 1987 for a guy named Robert Schuller. We was Reverend Robert Schuller. He's a guy that moved from Iowa to Southern California and started a congregation, and he used to preach on the roof of the snack bar in the drive-in movie theater in Orange, California. And his wife would play, they had an organ they pulled on a trailer behind the car, and his wife would play the organ, and he would get up on the snack bar and preach on Sunday mornings to people that were sitting in the drive-in movie theater parking lot. Well, later he developed that into the Crystal Cathedral, and then he started an internationally known TV show called The Hour of Power. And, and he was he was a non-denominational Christian guy. But I did a job for him, and actually he gave me a copy of a book he had written. And, Norman Vincent Peale talked about positive thinking But Schuler took that and talked about possibility thinking, and how to be a possibility. Look at the possibilities, and when you're confronted with an obstacle, go through it, go around it, go under it, but don't stand there scratching your head saying, what do I do? And if you take positive action, something good will happen, and you'll figure it out. When we stand there frozen, not knowing what to do, or fear of making a mistake or doing something, then nothing good happens. So a lot of the books, and they're not well known, but they're stuff by Robert Schuler.
Okay.
And it all has to do with possibility thinking. And, that I would recommend anything you can find by Robert Schuler. And I think it's SCHULLER. He passed away a few years ago, but his stuff's still out there, and a very, very inspirational guy.
I actually am taking notes on that. That's the first time I've heard that. All right. So one last question for you. Unless you have anything else you want to share, but what's your favorite song?
Funky Comedina by Tone Loc.
Now that's on Friday nights in the pool when the disco balls out. That's when Disco Daddy's out, right?
You weren't expecting that one, were you? No, my favorite.
Frank Sinatra is what I was expecting.
My favorite song is My Way by Frank Sinatra, written by Paul Anka. I just think that the words register with me and the way I've looked at my life. And I think, they'll register with a lot of other people if you just stop and listen to the lyrics. And, and at the end of the day, each of us have to do it our way, right?
Yeah.
And if we do it our way, and we do it the right way, and we deal with the ups and downs and, all the blows that we take along the way, we look back and we've led a good life, and we've made the world a better place. And, that's why we're here. Leave it a better place than we found it.
Yep. And I'm just going to say, I really like your way. You've done a hell of a job, and you've influenced. Try not to get too emotional, bunch of crybabies here. But yeah, your way is very inspirational. Your way is something that I've looked at very, very dearly. And, you heard me share on a stage powerfully a few weeks ago. And I went up after you, and you put your arm around me and said, Sean, I just got a little bit of advice. You got to put some heart into what you're doing. And I put all my heart into it because I watched you put all your heart into what you do. And I saw the impact you had, not only on other contractors, but on your employees. I mean, the stories, we could do a whole episode of stories of lives you impacted. Jack Canfield has his chicken soup for the soul. We could do Charlie Gindele's impacted lives in Southern California of employees that called you family because you took such good care of them. So job well done, my friend.
Thank you, Sean. It's always a pleasure, and look forward to seeing you in person soon.
Yes, we'll do it. Thank you so much. I love you. Have a great rest of the week.
Thank you.
I'll see ya.